In Farloom, not all places were meant to be seen by the common bugs of the citadel. Far beneath the shining spires and beneath the resonant coral chambers lies a place spoken of only in whispers. A place where silk was not a gift, but a curse, spun from the souls of the dying and woven into the flesh of the living. This was the Whiteward. Outwardly, it appeared to be a hospital, a sanctuary for the sick and the frail. But behind its pale walls, surgeons and conductors worked tirelessly to reshape life itself. The goal was noble in intent: to cure sickness, to defy decay, to achieve immortality. But as many things in Farloom, ambition quickly turned to obsession. The White World became a crucible where the boundaries between healing and horror vanished entirely. The tools of medicine became instruments of torment, and pursuit of perfection birthed only ruin. What was once meant to preserve life instead created husks, hollow echoes of what once lived, capable only of following their final imprinted orders. The price of eternity was the death of a soul. Immortal bodies lived on, but the mortal mind within them perished. Even now, deep within those haunted halls, machines still fume. The air is thick with threads of living silk that drift through the air like specters. The remnants of failed subjects still stir in the dark, fragments of once living consciousness bound forever to their own empty shells. This is the heart of Farloom's corruption, the place where eternal song began to unravel. Whiteward was probably once a legitimate hospital, used by the Farloom's high caste as a place of medical care and treatment. The remnants of this past still linger, and faint traces of medical alkaloids still sitting on the dust-covered shelves. But its purpose changed. Somewhere along the way, it was refurnished to be a Frankenstein-like laboratory, and the instruments of healing were replaced with tools of control. The silk became a weapon and a means of reshaping the very essence of life. To understand why this happened, we must look not at the Whiteward itself, but at the citadel above it, and explain what was the purpose of citadel itself. In the past, no, not that far back, yes, here, following the creation and the rebellion of weavers against Grandmother Silk, a song was born, a melody that would keep the pale being in a deep slumber. The weavers, crafted by Grandmother Silk herself, had rebelled against their creator and bound her power with this song. But there was a problem. This melody they created, very effective at keeping the pale being at bay, needed to be played endlessly and relentlessly, for eternity and more. But the weavers created by Grandmother Silk were not really capable of reproducing, seeing as they themselves were created by the pale being. So, as their numbers started to diminish over the time, the task of keeping this song alive fell on the bugs of the Farloom. To sustain the sacred task, the citadel assigned roles to its denizens: the architects who designed the citadel's resonant halls, the conductors who led their choirs, and the vault keepers who guarded its sacred archives. Together, they would uphold the song tirelessly and eternally. But even the most devout servants cannot escape death, and that was the citadel's greatest flaw. For how can a kingdom maintain an eternal song when its singers, its builders, and its keepers were bound by mortality? How can the melody endure the inevitable decay of those who carried it out? The answer, or so they believed, lied in the power of the silk. The answer they sought was immortality, not in the divine sense, but through artificial preservation, the binding of silk and soul. Silk was no ordinary material. It was spun from the soul of its creator, a living essence woven into the physical form. Its threads could heal wounds, extend life, and imbue objects with strange, lingering consciousness. And the citadel and the weavers knew of these sacred properties. The surgeons of the citadel began their grim work, guided by a singular purpose: to imbue life itself with silk, binding it to the body in such a way that the decay could never touch it. Medical experiments on the properties of silk started within the Whiteward, changing the place once used for healing into a torturous laboratory where inhumane experiments took place. The tools that once saved lives now ensured that those same lives would never end. These experiments marked the beginning of Farloom's slow descent into madness and obsession. The promise of eternal life spread quickly, a seduction of immortality for the mortal bugs. And this seemed like a miracle at first. The surgeons found that by embedding silk into the shell of the bugs, they could extend life indefinitely. To the desperate, this was a miracle. To the citadel, it was a triumph. But to those who endured it, it was a torment beyond imagining. The silk spun from the soul of the dying did more than preserve life. It replaced it. The bodies lived, yes, but what made those beings themselves, their thoughts, their memories, their wills, all dissolved into the endless threads that bound them, and the last of their memories were embedded into the torturous contraptions they were strapped to. We can still see these memories once Hornet placed her needle next to these cruel machines. The creatures that came out of these machines and the creatures you fight here are the result of Frankenstein-like experiments done to these bugs of Farloom. Even the name Whiteward holds a cruel irony. Now it is not known if the name was given to the place before or after the experiment started, but it would make sense that the original name was different. The word ward means a separate area in a hospital, and white most likely mimicking the color of the silk used here, or perhaps an illusion of purity. The symbol marking the entrance also resembles the head of a needle, the kind of used to pierce shells and infuse silk directly into the bodies of the bugs, which for a place that should be kept a secret is pretty openly giving out clues on what is happening there. One of the bugs that is not of high status and knows of this place and what happened here is the caretaker. His dialogue after you discover Whiteward gives us a lot of information. Have you done it, Bellringer? Wriggled deep, discovered the depths of obsession that brought this place so low. If you speak of the citadel and its silk caretaker, then yes, I know the start of it. In the ward down below, I saw it clear, the hollowed husks, and the many torturous implements, machines to instill a bug with thread that would see their life extended. That's it in part, but there's more scale to it than all that. Just think of them, greedily shoving the silk into their shells, the madness that overcame them, eternal life for mortal bugs. Then think on how long it's all gone on. The children born of them, and all the pilgrims after, the silk has seeded deep into this kingdom's shells, generations deep. No wonder Farloom's bugs proved such easy prey for the haunted thread. It had only to seek for itself to reach them. Ho ho, now you're seeing it, Bellringer. These poor pilgrims, all born bound to the cruel system of our world, now stricken in its new cursed web. You at least are free from it, and free to shake it all up, if that's your choosing. And here we discover a lot. After the bugs were ripped open and their bodies filled with silk, the surgeons of the Whiteward would stitch them back up using silk's healing properties to seal the wounds completely, but not all returned as stronger, enhanced versions of themselves. Some came back as something far worse, reanimated corpses, not empowered by silk, but corrupted by it. And the corruption didn't stop there. The silken filaments left behind in the air began to infect everything around them, twisting even the surgeons themselves. As one hunter entry describes it, living silk commanding a dead shell, an affront to nature, and one all too common across Farloom. And for that reason, Whiteward stood as both a secret and a monument. A secret that the Citadel could never allow surface, and a monument to its own obsession with immortality. And so, beneath the shining towers of Farloom, beneath the songs that echoed in praise of the kingdom's eternal glory, the Whiteward surgeons continued their sacred work, weaving life and death together into one seamless thread, and it is here, in these quiet, sterile halls, that Farloom's tragedy began. What began as small experiments soon became the foundation of Farloom. Within Whiteward, the Citadel's surgeons worked tirelessly to merge life and flesh to create beings who would continue their sacred duties forever. But this pursuit of eternity demanded a terrible price. You see, this silk needed to come from somewhere, and it came not from the strong, nor the weavers, nor the noble. It was the frail, the elderly, and the dying. Those whose lives were already sliding away. To the citizens of Farloom, these quote-unquote volunteers were said to be fulfilling a holy duty. They were told that their sacrifice would preserve the kingdom and that they would help the eternal song, which in fact was true. They did not lie about this, but they did not disclose the details on how they would be helping their kingdom. Their fates were sealed under the guise of devotion. They truly believed that what they were doing was sacred and holy. Choral commandment, named the Terra de Decree of the Citadel, found deep within Whiteward, tells us of this cruel manipulation. Bugs of voice grown hoarse, or shell fallen frail, you have been selected for the duty most sacred. Become our light, our guide in the darkness, that others worthy may climb to join the holy song. The sick were told they would become the light. Instead, they became fuel for the strong. The strong and capable of the citadel were bound to operating tables. Their shells were pierced, torn open with gleaming needles as silk was threaded into their bodies. Their screams were mistaken for hymns, and when their voices finally fell silent, their bodies continued to move, eternal, obedient, and empty. The perfect workers. Not all survived this process. Some were actually lucky, and their souls were completely dissolved into threads. The surgeon's orders, another commandment found in the Whiteward, reveals this. The vowed has succumbed during silk suture, refuses to revive, sin committed, permit no rites, husk marked for cremation, retrieve dregs. From this, we can see that not all experiments were successful and not everyone came back to life after being filled up with silk. But this choral commandment also mentions sin committed, and what is that to be precise? You would think that by everything said so far, the sin that was committed would be the inhuman torturous experiments, but no. As revealed by the lore tablet found in the Whiteward, the sin they committed is breaking the Whiteward oath. Oath of Whiteward. While song must be sung, none may falter. Infirmity, sickness, death, all are banished from our citadel. So, the sin was that someone died. In Farloom, death itself became a blasphemy. And, okay, now we have sinned. What happens with the dead bodies? Well, if we once again take a look at our trusty choral commandment, permit no rites, husk marked for cremation, retrieve dregs. When a subject perished after the experiments, they were not allowed any funeral or religious ceremonies. Instead, their bodies were dragged to the lower parts of Whiteward, where their bodies were dismembered and stuffed into giant furnaces by the morticians working there. The morticians working there were equipped with giant scissors which they used to cut off any silk still remaining in the bodies. Which is quite ironic since a mortician is a professional who prepares deceased bodies for funeral service, often involving fixing up and making the bodies presentable and assisting families with funeral. But these bugs did the complete opposite. They mutilated the dead bodies, and the bugs that were dead were not allowed any funeral or burial ceremonies. The morticians who oversaw this grim work were little more than scavengers, obsessed with reclaiming every strand of silk from the dead. And from the needling text we get from them, we can really see just how obsessed the Whiteward was with gathering every tiny bit of silk and soul from the bodies. Holy wonder, preserved through flame, even these dregs. Let nothing be wasted. All are holy. All is needed. To them, nothing was sacred except their job. Even in death, the bugs were stripped of identity, reduced to raw material. The Citadel song demanded that life never end. But enforcing this, it achieved only stagnation. So now we know the gist of what happened here. But how did it all actually work? How did they infuse silk into the shells of the bugs? And more importantly, how did they take it out? With silk having such a wide range of uses, it's not surprising why the surgeons of the Whiteward sought to extract it from the living beings. But such a precious commodity couldn't be easily obtained, and it wasn't. Throughout Whiteward, we see countless machines built to inject silk into the shells of the bugs, strange contraptions meant to bind the life itself to thread. But there is only one device, far larger than all the rest, known as the silk siphon. And this device served the opposite purpose, to extract silk and soul from the living. The silk siphon was a grotesque marvel of Farloom's ambition, a towering machine designed to draw out the very essence of its victims. The extracted silk could then be injected into others, prolonging their lives, or used for something far stranger, a secret purpose not mentioned anywhere in the silk's description. Because silk, when combined with soul of the living, can do more than preserve life. It can create it. This is where the strange silk flies come in. Small glowing creatures that resemble lumiflies from Hollow Nest, but only at first glance. In the silk siphon's chamber, the elderly or the sick would be placed within the machine, and their very soul would be drained out to create these threads of living silk. And if those threads went undisturbed, they would spring to life, which is not that strange as we know there are living beings in Farloom fully made from silk. These creatures are the so-called silk lumaflies, and when I say so-called, it means I call them that. To the right of the siphon lies a hidden room, a silent grave filled with bodies of those who willingly volunteered, offering up their souls for what they believed was a sacred cause. In this room and next to the siphon, the needle in text reveals to us their final thoughts before they were put to use. To serve beyond shell, to devote eternal. Must we? Why? This pain. Remember my voice. Please. Their sacrifice birthed these luminescent creatures that drift throughout Farloom even now. Many have mistaken, even me in my old videos, these creatures for lumaflies, the small bugs that we found in Hollow Knight, but that's unlikely. Lumaflies from Hollow Nest have 2 wings and no tail, while these creatures have 4 wings and something that looks like a tin tail. Also, they are tied to silk in some way, a thing that was not so present in Hollow Nest, but you could argue that the weavers might have created them while they were in the Hollow Nest, but lumaflies also generate electricity when found in big clusters as mentioned by the hunter, but these beings emit no such energy. Instead, their glow seems tied to silk itself. We don't actually know how these bugs are created, but my guess is that when soul-infused silk is left undisturbed for a long period of time, it will spring to life on its own. But if you have any other theories, you're free to leave them in the comments below. These creatures, once formed, are carefully contained within glass spheres that can be found even outside the Whiteward. The text found within Whiteward near the silk siphon when needling, as well as the text within the coral command, might not only describe the fate of the bugs, but also the butterflies themselves. One inscription reads, "Become our light, our guide in the darkness, that others worthy may climb to join the holy song." At first this sounds like a metaphor, but perhaps it's meant quite literally. Become our light, our guide. In several parts of the Farloom, we can actually see these silk butterflies acting as lights in the dark corridors and as guides through the mist. But illumination isn't their only purpose. These creatures can also give life, as mentioned earlier. The proof of this is that every single mechanical enemy releases a silk lumafly upon defeat, and depending on the size of the machine, an equivalent number of these silk creatures seems to be required to keep them alive. For example, the smaller automatons found throughout the cogworks only need a single silk fly to function, but far larger machines like the cogwork clapper or the fourth chorus, a massive construct built for labor and suppression of heresy, the amount of silk required to power them grows exponentially. We see all those silk lumaflies escape from the chorus once defeated, bursting free from their frames. And when the needle is played next to the chorus, located in the underworks near the architect, the text reads, "We all together." This could imply that the souls within the lumaflies remain conscious, still linked one to another even after being harvested. But this is further confirmed by the fourth chorus needling text, which says, "Sacred light, song holy, we are many, we are one, voices together, strong, strong," confirming that these souls are still somewhat conscious in there. We can also find a large lantern filled with these luminescent creatures in the same room where the architect crest is obtained. It might serve both as light source and the power reserve for the next chorus. This pattern of silk lumaflies being needed for life extends to the architects themselves, since they are not regular bugs in nature, rather something resembling a sentient robot. You can in fact see one of the lanterns used to store the silk butterflies near the architect, and when one of them dies, a single butterfly emerges from the architect's remains. This detail further supports the idea that these silk butterflies, or lumaflies, are the very source of life animating Farloom's mechanical inhabitants. These silkborn creatures seem to exist somewhere between life and death, between natural and artificial. But behind all this, the life, the light, and the sorrow, someone had to oversee it. Someone had to conduct the process. As for the buck put in charge of this horrific hospital, the role belonged to one of the Farlum's conductors. Deep in the pits of Whiteward, locked behind the surgeon's key and hidden away from the unworthy, lies the remains of conductor Mizello. What we encounter there, however, is not Mizello himself, not even some corrupted version of his being, but rather a mass of tormented souls fused together with his shell, their obsession with Silk having completely consumed them. The creature we face is appropriately named the Unraveled. The fight itself reflects this loss of identity. None of the conductor's former self remains. His fragmented voice, distorted by the countless souls speaking at once, repeats broken phrases like who, we, where, when, cannot see, cannot feel, cannot remember. Even during the battle, the conductor's form expels silk-corrupted husks, once living bugs, as if they were souls bound within him and trying to escape. When Hornet finally defeats this amalgamation of anguish, she is granted one of the Silk Hearts. Each Silk Heart represents some kind of memory, and upon acquiring one, Hornet experienced the vision tied to that memory. Their voices, their song, their memory, bind their shells, bind their souls, bind them all, raise them up, to devote eternal, one mind, one union. They are ours, bound forever. Like the other Silk Heart's inscriptions, these words seem to echo the voice of Grandmother Silk herself. The first half could describe the Whiteward's grim purpose, binding together the bodies and the souls of the countless bugs to create eternal servants, but the other half, however, clearly speaks from Grandmother Silk's perspective, a being striving to unify all life under one mind, one purpose, one will. In this sense, the message mirrors that of the Radiants, another divine being seeking unity through control. One mind, one union is eerily similar to the Radiance's hive mind influence over the infected of the Hollow Nest. But that comparison is a subject for another video. After defeating the Unraveled, Hornet finally gains access out of the Whiteward. On her way out, she discovers a small hidden room containing a psalm on which we hear what is arguably the most disturbing piece of audio in Silksong. It records the last surgery of conductor Mizello, performed in the Whiteward's operating theater. As the recording plays, we can hear Mizello's calm voice, giving instructions or rather narrating each step of his grotesque operation. In the background, the faint tormented sounds of the bug's shell being open while still conscious echo through the chamber. Even though all these disturbing things took place here, not everything within Whiteward was built for cruelty. Buried within its horrors are traces of the purpose it once served. Beds meant for healing, shells filled with medicine, and relics of the tools designed to mend rather than mutilate. When Hornet rescues Sherma, a wandering pilgrim trapped within the ward, he later returns to Songclave, using supplies he scavenged in the Whiteward to treat the wounds of the pilgrims. It's a small reminder that even in this place built for exploitation, the idea of healing never truly vanished. The Whiteward was never meant to be evil. It was a place of desperation, where good intentions were twisted by fear. Its surgeons sought salvation for the kingdom, but their hands forged damnation. And this entire sequence, the sacrifice, the obsession, the search for eternal life, mirrors what we already seen once before in Hollow Knight, with the experiments within the Soul Sanctum. The scholars of the Soul Sanctum harbored Soul to wield it as a weapon against the infection. Countless lives were sacrificed, their essence harvested, and injected into the scholars' own bodies, just as the surgeons of the Farloom infused their subjects with silk. The Soul Master's Hunter's Journal entry even includes a haunting line that perfectly parallels Farloom's tragedy. Perhaps the infection came from somewhere deep inside of them, that they could not escape. In the same way, when Grandmother Silk began to awaken, The bugs of Farloom found themselves unable to resist her influence. The silk already woven into their very shells now bound them to her very will. Their attempts to prolong life, to defy decay, became the source of their downfall. Because over generations of genetic inheritance, nearly all bugs in Farloom have silk woven into their shells, and in the end, every strand of silk in Farloom, no matter how refined or repurposed, can be traced back to its origin. And when that origin stirs, everything connected to it must follow. The Whiteward's procedures may have extended the life within the Citadel, but they have also unknowingly gifted countless minds and countless souls to the monarch of the Silk. So now, to shortly sum it all up, Whiteward started as a simple hospital, a place meant to heal the sick and the weak. But somewhere along the way, the purpose was twisted and the surgeons there became obsessed with silk. They learned that by infusing silk into the bug's body, they could extend its life, sometimes forever. But the problem with that was that what came back wasn't really alive anymore. The mind would fade and only an empty shell would remain. The Citadel saw this as a miracle. The sick were told they were performing a holy duty, but in truth, they were just fuel. Their souls were drained, their silk recycled, and their bodies burned in the furnaces below. Over time, even machines began to run on this stolen silk, powering Farloom's lifeless automatons. And all of these procedures were overseen by Conductor Mizzello, who, by infusing all these bugs with silk, unknowingly helped Grandmother Silk herself. And when she finally awoke, everything being touched by silk was already hers. And after all this was done, the ward now stays as a dark memory of the Citadel, only known by a certain few old enough to remember it and lucky enough not to be seduced by its promise of immortality. The residents of its dark halls still linger about, forever trapped to live in their accursed bodies, incapable of dying. So at the end, we can take one lesson from all of this. Do not kill thousands of bugs to create immortal husks, because a godly being will still win in the end.